Hello, it's really great to be here as the first, I believe, first UK nurse innovator to come to MedX, so it's fantastic to be here. So I work in Salisbury Hospital as clinical innovator, and I manage an innovation portfolio where we develop genetics innovations and patient devices to improve patient care. And Salisbury Hospital, I usually have to introduce Salisbury Hospital by saying it's in the UK, it's in the southwest of England, and it's near Stonehenge. But I think I probably don't need to introduce Salisbury now. So we're very proud of our experience of developing a whole range of innovations and being the first hospital in the UK to have a spin-out company. And we really feel that we develop excellent patient care. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about one of the first products I innovated. So I can put this around to the audience so you can see what I'm talking about. And what we did, we had a product that we made over 25 years ago in Salisbury, and it was developed by a clinical scientist to improve patient care. When years and years ago we didn't have all these enteral feeds, people's skin was deteriorating when they came in after burns and plastic surgery. So what we wanted to do is to produce a product that would help them improve the skin texture and ensure that they could go home as soon as possible. So we'd had this product for sort of 25 years. It was made in very small scale in our pharmacy department, and we just gave it to our patients to take home with them. It was in a little plain white pot. And over the years, people always said, well, could we sort of develop this further? Could we commercialise that? Could we sell it outside of the hospital and bring funds back into patient care? But also that people were really enjoyed using the product. They wanted to purchase it from us after they'd been a patient in the hospital. So what we did is like, how can we do this? People had tried before and failed, and they asked me to look at how we could innovate and take this one product that we had and take it out into the commercial world. And let me tell you, innovation in the NHS is incredibly difficult. If you think it's difficult in the USA, try it in the NHS. So what we did is we had this product. We knew that it worked for our patients. They'd used it over that 25 years, that length of time. So we wanted to look at how we could do this. And to be honest, I'm a clinical nurse. I've worked in plastic surgery, but I've not developed a beauty product. So what did I do? I Googled it. Try and find a commercial company that could work with us to take our formulas and bring them out into the commercial world so that we could sell those. So that's what we did, and it was, I think with innovation, you just have to, sometimes you just have to have the courage to go for it and learn as you go along. Use the knowledge that you've got, which will all contribute to developing a product, but actually just take one step at a time and then try and develop that product. So we started doing this, and we set a launch date, and then we were phoned up by the BBC in England, and they said, we've heard that you're going to launch a beauty product. That's amazing. How are you doing that as a hospital? And we said, well, this is something that we've never done before, but we're very passionate about innovation, and we want our patients to be able to use this, and we want to share it further with the world. And the other thing that we want to do is all the money that comes from developing that product, we want to put back into patient care. They said, that's fantastic. Let's get you on the One Show. And if you don't know the One Show, which you probably don't, it goes out every night, every weeknight on 7 o'clock. And it also goes out over iPlayer as well. So it's got an international audience. So we restructured about how we could line up production with filming for the One Show, because what they wanted to show on the television was the tubes coming off the production line. They wanted to talk to us about how we'd done that. They also wanted to know, what was the cost of this? How can a hospital do something like this? So we did the filming, and we filmed lots of pieces for them. It started about 7 o'clock in the morning, and we probably finished about 6 o'clock. And the whole piece that was on the One Show, as you can imagine, was quite a short piece, but it was really about engaging a debate. And the title of the piece that they did for us was, should the NHS be spending your money on a beauty product? So they'd contacted us all about this fantastic innovation, about how brilliant it was that you could do this. And then they lined up some celebrities on the sofa to discuss the merits of innovating in the NHS. So what actually happened was that we saw they didn't tell us when it was going to go out live. They were supposed to show us the film before it went out. We didn't see any of that. And I was like, oh my goodness, what if lots of people contact the hospital? I have to make sure there's enough people to be answering the phones, to make sure that patient care is not compromised by doing this, because it's going out tonight and we just don't know what will happen. So what I did, I got lots of people in to man the phones just in case. It might have been a damp squib, I didn't know, but we had to make sure that patient care was safe. So they showed the piece, and they had, if you can see there, these are the two on the outside, the presenters, and Paddy McGuinness is one of our celebrities, and they had a TV doctor on there as well. And they said, you know, should the NHS be doing this with your money? And the celebrities on the television said, why not? If it's putting money back into the NHS, so putting that money back into patient care, if it's a great product that we know will work, why wouldn't you do that? And I actually couldn't watch it live. I just couldn't. I don't like seeing myself on television. And I sat there with my iPad in my hands, looking at what was going on social media to see what the reaction was, because it was quite controversial. And I could see lots of really positive comments from people on Twitter about how brilliant this was. So I then watched it with my hands over my eyes to actually see it. But what we had from that day, so we'd launched 2 months before, and we had the most massive sales that we've ever had, because the whole world went absolutely mad and were ringing us up. They were emailing us. They were putting comments on the website about how amazing it was that an organisation could do this. And we'd also really involved our staff in developing the product. So I put out an email just in our local sort of intranet and said, would anybody like to be involved in developing a beauty product? Would you like to be testers? So my email had gone mad when I'd had that, and I'd had lots of people that had been testers of the products for us. And when I came into work the next day after we'd been on the One Show, people were coming up to me, and it was right throughout the organisation. So it was porters, healthcare support workers, nurses, doctors, all saying how proud they felt to be part of an innovation from the NHS. So that was just really perfect, because actually we knew we were on the right track. So one of the things with developing the product was about how can we widen the brand? How can we make it work so that, yes, there's a really medical version, a bit like a lot of the creams that I can't mention here, but obviously you're aware of that are out there. But also, how can we expand it into more of a beauty brand as well to get the commercial development and additional funding in? So we developed, so one of the innovations I did was around making a body butter and a face and body oil. Now, I pitched this to a fairly male group of people that were going to fund this in our organisation, and they used to ask me questions like, what's a body butter? What does it do? So I was really, really pleased that they were able to fund that, and we've gone forward with those, and they've all won awards in the beauty industry and also in pharmacy and other areas about ethical beauty care. And I was listed as a top 50 innovator, and it just really made me feel that it's something that you want to do innovation, but where do you go to find out about how you would do that? How do you bridge that gap between knowing that you could do a product, but stepping aside and just doing it? You know, I Googled some information, but wouldn't it have been great if there was something that I could look up and see how innovation could happen, if I could have experts to do that with me? So I really felt like I was innovating at the edge. And I know, talking to people here at MedX, there are so many people that feel that same way, that have the confidence to go for it, but actually it would be really helpful if they could have information that's available to them, a different way of finding out that information, because not every innovator's pathway is the same. Everybody's different. So this is the full range of the products that we've got now, and they're all making money that's going back into patient care. But it was also part of this, it was the start of my mission really to think about how can I support other healthcare innovators. Part of my job at Salisbury is to work with other innovators that might be developing medical devices, and also I work nationally with other people to try and help them develop their products or their services. So this was really about, right, I've done this myself, so I know that I'm not the expert, but there's lots of other people that feel the same way, and how could we try and help people to do that? I think some of innovation is really about connecting the dots, and I know that's an old slogan to say that, but I do think it is about what you learn. For My Trusty brand, I had worked as a plastic surgery nurse. I'd also done pieces of work around aromatherapy, so I knew how essential oils could be put together into formulations. And these are a few of the things that I've done in my journey, really, as an innovator, that helped me understand the bigger picture of innovation. So I worked for 2 years as a transformational fellow, and we were looking at horizon scanning, everything that's going on within healthcare, and trying to pull that back into the NHS and share that with other people so that they could do that in their other organisations. I worked on something called The Edge, which you can still see online, which is a platform which was looking at trying to help people to undertake transformational care and do digital health. So what we did with The Edge, we started when I first went up to Horizons, and we looked at how could we curate content that would help people, and that's why I got the idea about how we could have a platform that might help innovators. And we also got people that might be clinicians, but they could be caregivers, they could be patients telling their stories and also of transformational change. And we went from 0 subscribers when we started till 2 years after that, we went to over 50,000 people in 140 countries, all subscribing to The Edge, checking the content. And we worked with health systems right the way through the world. So we worked with Kaiser, we worked in Kowawata in New Zealand, pulling that information that's going on throughout the world into one place where people could find it easily. So they didn't have to go off and do their horizon scanning. We would do some of that for them. Also, we did a big project called Change Day, which is about how you can make a difference, how you can do change in your organisation, no matter what your job is, how you can make change happen. And that has run successfully for many years. And for the people from the UK will know that it's a massive, massive undertaking. And every year, lots of change happens on the back of NHS Change Day. And we've shared that research throughout the world, really. People have tried to say, how can we look at making people be change agents? So that is part of doing that. And the People's Transformathon was a really unique project. It was a digital broadcasting event for 12 hours, live over the internet, streamed. And we got a whole range of people, from patients, carers, volunteers, etc., sharing their stories about their transformational change live on the internet. And it was co-designed really from the bottom up. So everybody felt part of that and was involved in the co-production of this one event that went out live. It was very, very nerve-wracking to do that, because a lot of the people that we were speaking to had never presented before. And to do it live over the internet and know that lots of people would be listening was quite scary for people. But it taught me how there's some brilliant stories out there, and that people want to tell their story and want to help other people to try and do transformational change. I did a session on something called the Transformathon, which was prior to the People's Transformathon, and we had a session which was looking at transforming healthcare with social media, and we worked with Simpler. So they beamed in from, where was it, Los Angeles at the time? And so this was all going out live over 24-hour sessions. So we stayed up all day and all night to do this People's Transformathon for 24 hours. But we did a small session around transforming social healthcare through social media with patient innovators telling their story in this session, simpler, and also clinicians telling their story. And it was the most popular session of the whole Transformathon, which was great. And in the middle there, you can see the clinical entrepreneurship program. So I don't think any idea is unique. So obviously, other people felt that this is what needs to happen, that we need to try and set up some form of agency to make innovation happen in entrepreneurship. And NHS England worked really hard to develop this program. But the only thing I would say is the entrepreneurship program started off with just doctors. So as an innovator, as a nurse, I couldn't be part of that program. But what I could do is I could be a mentor to that program, to work with the junior doctors, to help them understand what innovating at the front line is really like. So it was quite interesting to see how you can connect the dots and use that in your innovation journey. So this obviously was really important to me, that I looked at how could we develop and support healthcare innovators. And I chose the term healthcare innovators very carefully because there are intrapreneurs, entrepreneurs, patient leaders, patient innovators. And my piece of research was quite succinct for my dissertation, so it could only go so far. So I looked at healthcare innovators, which I defined as clinical staff. And as you can see there, it was the first time that there was this juxtaposition of existing innovation literature and the experience of NHS healthcare innovators. And I covered nurses, doctors, managers, lots of different people all innovating in health. And what I was really surprised at is there was lots of information, lots of research around how you do innovation, how you develop an innovation culture, how you manage innovation, but nothing about how you develop and support innovators. It was quite sparse. And I was told really not to do that as a research study because they said it would be incredibly difficult because there was no literature to search that. And my question back to them was, well, isn't that what research is about? Isn't it about defining additional information that can help develop people further? Isn't that the whole point of trying to do research? So what I tried to do through my qualitative study was to understand the lived experience of a healthcare innovator. And there's been a few more pieces of research come out since, but it's interesting to see that they found similar key themes to me. And I focused a lot around what were the character traits and competencies, how could you make innovation serendipity happen? Was it really important in the healthcare innovator's journey? Because for me it was about who I connected with that enabled me to develop the product. It was enabled me to look at what other things could we try and do. And we did some mad things to develop our product. But it's about how can you do that? And are innovators born, or are they born, or is it something that you develop through nurture? Lots of really interesting questions, and I wanted to see what the research would actually flag up. So these were some of my themes, and I think they're very interconnected. It is around engineering serendipity. Sometimes you don't know the right way to do things, but by tapping into various networks and connections, trying to get peer support, and how you can enable your job to be developed so that you've got somebody that supports you. You know, if you're working in an organisation, you've got somebody that will support you and make space for you to innovate, to help you do that within a very busy healthcare system. It's about how you can find that information that might not be a course. It might be that you find out about IDEO, you might find out about the work of MedX. Loads of different things that you could find out that would actually enable you to do innovation really well. And yes, innovation culture is important because obviously if you're not supported in an organisation, that you won't be able to do that. But it depends really if you're looking at setting up a business and doing it as an entrepreneurship, or whether you want to work in the system. So it's probably a different approach to in the States, but this was very much focused about innovators in the NHS system. And one of my innovators made this quote, which I think is really interesting, and it came out through many of the other, much of the evidence really from all of the innovators that I interviewed. And it was really, we do think of like the Steve Jobs of the world, we do think of, you know, Elon Musk, and they're great people and are very visionary. But reality was that most of the people that we interviewed said that they just stumbled across those opportunities. It was an innovation, sort of serendipity, that they'd met somebody and they knew somebody else, that they connected them into this bigger web of how you could develop innovation. And so I really like that quote, because although we buy into the idea of the visionary leader, there's another approach going on as well, and I think that really fits with what MedX are trying to do. So one of my questions that you might want to think about is, how can we increase serendipitous moments for innovators? How do we make that happen? How does it just occur like that? Is it about us building a platform where people can connect in, talk with other innovators, come to places like MedX? Lots and lots of questions there. And throughout my research, there was a real clear definition between, there was entrepreneurship going on, but there was also lots of intrapreneurship. People that were working in the NHS system, entrepreneurs, just wanted to see that product out there because they wanted it to improve patient care or to make a difference. They weren't interested in going off, leaving their job. So if they were a nurse, they didn't want to leave that job, but they wanted that product or that device out there. Yet there were other people that clearly saw this was a stepping stone to being an entrepreneur. So that was quite interesting for me to find that out. If you're looking at being an intrapreneur or an entrepreneur, you have a different pathway to innovation. So the title of the presentation is about bridging the gap for healthcare innovators. And there were lots of suggestions from the innovators that I interviewed. There was lots of information from the literature search that I undertook, which was a very difficult literature search, but I'm very glad that I've kept going with that with a bit of grit to actually find that information. And for me, it is about taking some of the knowledge where I've built platforms before for NHS England, and trying to pull that together as a digital platform where everyone can be included. I don't think innovation is for just one type of person. I think we should try to be embedding innovation throughout the whole healthcare system. And I want it to be with patients right in the middle of this, that actually, just like here at MedX, it's just normal that we have patient innovators. And I met some fantastic patient innovators, and Karen's coming up in my panel, who's going to talk about that a bit later with me. And I came up with a methodology about, it's a real sort of startup methodology, but it's about how you spark the idea, how sometimes you need to pivot to make it fit with the system that you're in, and that might take several attempts, and how you sprint with that to test it. So very much a design sprint, that you try different things. So for when we had My Trusty, we tried different things to see if it worked. We tested whether the name My Trusty would work for people. We had a selection of brand names that we looked at. And the reason that we went with My Trusty was because we are a foundation trust as an organisation, and because we feel that people trust the National Health Service. There's a real love for the National Health Service in the UK. So that's where that methodology came from. And if you're building a platform, it needs to be a natural water cooler for innovators to come from whatever background they are. So they could be a designer, they could be a patient innovator, but bring them all to one connection point so they can find the pathway that works for them. And that's what I wanted to do with a digital platform. So I would just want to take a little breath here, because I was really pleased to be presenting at MedX to talk about the work that we're doing in England. And I was notified that my abstract had been accepted in the same week that I was actually diagnosed with a rare disease. I've not talked about this anywhere else, and I think it's really important to understand that all innovators, whether they're patient innovators initially or they're clinicians or designers, but we all have personal challenges. So I was diagnosed with something called eosinophilous esophagitis, And for me, it was quite surprising because I'd worked in endoscopy, where this disease is usually diagnosed, and I'd never even heard of it. So I'd worked in endoscopy for quite a few years, and it's a disease that's only really been recognised properly in the last 5, 7 years, so since I've not been in an endoscopy really. But I felt it was a personal story which, as I said, I've never shared, so this is my confidence to you, that I thought MedX was the right place to talk about it. It was a terrible week to find out that I was admitted to the ED, I hadn't been able to swallow, I had this diagnosis, and I knew that I was coming to MedX, but actually at the time I had no voice because my voice has just completely disappeared, and it's still very delicate at the moment, and when you're an extrovert person, that's actually quite hard, so you have to be a bit introvert. But I wanted to share that with you because I feel that everybody has challenges, and it's about how we try and work through those to try and carry on innovating. And it brings an additional depth, I think, to the work that you do. So this is my platform that I'm hoping to build, and I want to build this in the spirit of things that I've done before, with working in co-production with patient innovators, carers, volunteers, people that really understand the why of innovation. They understand what, you know, they want to get from that. So this could all be a really great platform where people could collaborate. And listening to the stories this morning about the Facebook issues and about our data, I still think there's a really good place for us to be sharing this type of information, because otherwise if we don't, all that knowledge is lost. So it's about how can you bridge that gap for fellow innovators, and looking at not only having a platform but having a network, and perhaps running ideas like innovation masterminds where you could pull people through Skype together from all over the world to share their stories of innovation and learn from each other, to try and fast track innovation into the system. So I wanted to finish my presentation to say that for me, innovation really is summed up by this. And coming to MedX, it was really important that I wanted to share the story of innovation from the UK, to share my research and some of the key themes that came out from that. Obviously, there's more depth to that, but just really for this presentation to say that sometimes you don't know how you're going to do things, and like I Googled it, you just sometimes have to take that leap of faith and just go for that. So that's really where I wanted to leave the presentation. So thank you very much for listening to my very personal story that I've shared with you. And Karen Solis is going to come up and just, we're going to have a little conversation, but we'd really like this to be very interactive because we've got quite a small panel. So that'd be really helpful.
Let's give a round of applause to Carol first.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to introduce you to Karen Solis. Karen is going to tell us a little bit more about what innovating at the edge looks like to her. She was a sports psychologist in Mexico and has more than 10 years experience working with athletes from beginners to the Olympic level. About 5 years ago, Karen became an e-scholar at Stanford Medicine X and started her blog with publications to help people in her country with the same condition, which is fibromyalgia. Karen is actually leading the psychology aspect of 11 Health. We're going to hear a little bit more about that, understanding the psychosocial and educational needs on ostomy patients and developing adherence models for them and stakeholders by using the vision of everyone, the everyone included model, to create new and effective solutions for final users. And also, Karen loves to dance salsa and Latin music, so if we have time at the end, we'll have some instruction in some dancing. But anyway, welcome, Karen.
Thank you. Well, I don't know.
Do you have a mic?
Have a mic, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you, Carol, for the invitation. I'm really glad to be here. And well, I would like just to start with maybe a little bit of background. Well, yes, I'm an e-patient. I'm living with fibromyalgia for more than 8 years. the first time that I came to MEDEX, I met Michael Sears. He is my CEO. He is the CEO of 11 Health. Maybe many people from here knows his story, but for those who don't know who is Michael, well, he is from the UK as well, and he has Crohn's disease, and in some point, due to his illness, the only way to keep living was to have surgery, and the surgery was a bowel transplant. So he became the 11th person in the world with a bowel transplant, and fortunately for us, he is alive. I mean, he is very fortunate, and at the time that he received his transplant, at the same time he received also an ostomy, an ileostomy. He just came with this ileostomy while he was in the hospital, and at that time he started thinking in the ways that he could improve his own quality of life, because he was having a lot of consequences because of the surgery and the ostomy. In that time, he started thinking and creating this sensor. The name was the Ostomy Alert. And the sensor has this potential to help the patients to understand how was the output going to the bag that was attached to his abdomen, and how could he prevent these unpleasant moments like leakings, or when the bag is really full, the bag could explode. So if you can imagine, if you are in your daily social life and you have this kind of accident, it's not just like having an accident. It has many other consequences. And also, how could he really contribute to his really the care of his life? Because if you are an ostomy patient, you need to be very careful about things like dehydration, because you could be readmitted and you could have many other complications, as infections or blockage, or, well, things that are related with the ostomy life. So Michael started with the ostomy sensor, and then he started with 11 Health. And everything started in the UK, and many years, well, 2 or 3 years after that, he discovered that, as Carol said, if he came to the States, it could be easier to take the product to the States and start the contribution to the community, helping with this kind of conditions. When I met Michael here, he is a very inspiring person. And we start like being friends, and in some point, when I was just thinking, how could I really like contribute more to the patients community, not just for the fibromyalgic patients. Then we spoke, and Michael invited me to come to the States and start doing like all the work that we are right now having with the ostomy patients. For us, the main important thing, and I don't want to say thing, but the most important part of our company is always our patients. We are always really aware of what are the needs from our patients and how could we really improve their quality of life. So everything that we are creating as a service or as a product is related to the patient needs. So we started with the innovation of our own sensor, then creating more services. Now we are a platform, but also we have started with this Patient Champions program. So we said that our most valuable part of our company is providing the possibility to other patients to connect and being part of our family. They are really our family. So we have this program when we are hiring patients, ostomy patients, that they are in reality every day collaborating with other patients that are our customers, but they provide this service to support from the technical side, but also from the emotional side. So when you connect to patients, you could have many possibilities to improve their own quality of life. And maybe something that is really important for me, because I'm leading the program and I'm in touch with the patient champions and also with the patients, is to understand that when the patient really feels that it's valued, when they understand that the knowledge of their experience is really a value, they give a big step, and then they start growing. And they have the possibility to see how important it is to help others, to help themselves. So just connecting a little bit with the innovation platform that Carol is speaking at the moment is, how do you need to start doing things even when you don't have everything under control? And in this case, when you don't have the control of the patients, you don't have the control of their lives, but you are offering a platform where they can really provide their experience as the most valuable part, their knowledge, and also the possibility to say that they have a job. Because if you are a chronic patient and your condition doesn't allow you to go to have a job, a work, then you can't pay your bills, and then you got mad, and you can be, well, more ill. So when they have this possibility to have a flexible time to work and then, well, being paid for that, the patients are really understanding that it doesn't matter if you have to work from your home. You have the possibility to work. You are valuable for that. And also, you are improving whatever solution that you are now working with us in the company. So everything that we do is because we are like creating, co-creating with the patients. So, well, this is just like
so we've really connected, haven't we? Because, I don't need. Oh. So I met Michael in the UK, and we used to always have conversations about how difficult it was to innovate in the NHS. And, you know, and he told me about how he was innovating in the States. And, you know, you always assume that in the States it would be more difficult, but actually it's incredibly difficult in the NHS, because I don't think have you got the products out in the NHS yet? Just starting to, aren't you? Yeah. So one of the things that I mentioned in the presentation was that I wasn't eligible to be in the clinical entrepreneurship program, even though that was what I was doing. And Michael was exactly the same, because Michael was a patient innovator. And they will be able to be in the clinical entrepreneurship program, and I think that's somewhere where we can signpost people. But it's really important that when people don't have anywhere to go, isn't it a great idea to capitalise on the wonderful knowledge that's out there in the community? And like your example about the patient champions, through the work that we did at Horizons, through the work that I've done through other platforms, people do want to generously contribute. They do want to tell their stories. They do want to sign people in, you know, where you can find out information about X, whether it be something as straightforward as CE marking or 3D printing, or practical solutions that will enable people to connect with other people to try and get their innovation out into the system. And when you're trying to generate innovation serendipity, it's talked about in lots of different ways, but it's about how are you actually going to do that? How can you make an innovation culture? How can you learn from the evidence that's out there about the traits of innovators? How can you access something that will enable you to bridge that gap, that you might not have any knowledge of a particular area, but you could talk with somebody within the platform? And, you know, one of the things I quite like to try to do, and was something that we did at a national level, was connecting like-minded people together around transformational change. But what I'd like to do is do that around innovation. So take a model like the mastermind model that's used in business quite a lot, but use that to connect people for innovation. So get ideas from people from different countries. They could Skype, or you could do it through you know, Google Hangouts, whole range of ways that you could do that to connect that evidence, but also have a digital platform where you can try to curate the various content that saves people hunting for it themselves, and also enable the people that are on board with the digital platform to contribute content to do just that. So what we'd like to do is just have a little stop there and see if you've got any questions. And I think you've probably seen the product My Trusty going around. So what are the things with that product? So some of the things about difficulty in the NHS. is the NHS is a brand, it's a trademark, it's very, very protected. So this is just one example of how difficult it is to innovate in the NHS. My Trustee is a product that was born in the NHS. It's been developed by clinicians, so initially a scientist, myself doing the extra products that we've done. So it's absolutely born in the NHS. It's come from an the organisation Salisbury Hospital. We have our own sort of branding, if you like, that captures the NHS logo in there. That lozenge is very protected. And we had debates and debates and debates before we launched about how we could use that. Because obviously, if we're saying it's a trusted product coming from the NHS, we want to put that on the product. And if you see, I don't know where it's got to now, but if you had a look at that, it does say the NHS, but we had to capture it within our Salisbury Hospital trademark, if you like, so the branding on that, and it had to go on the back. So if you think how strong a message the NHS is throughout the world, you know, we go internationally and work with a whole range of different people from the coming from the NHS and work overseas. But actually a product that was developed in the NHS is bringing money back into the NHS, so it's not going to be like entrepreneurship where people are making lots of money from that. Bringing all that money back into delivering patient care, and yet we could only put that NHS branding on the back of the product. So when it's lined up on shelves along, you know, other things like Dove, Aveeno, or Bio Oil, for instance, is one of the biggest selling face and body oils out there. We can't use our strongest message to sell that product to bring money back into patient care and do more innovation.
So Carol and Karen, let's take this time to take some questions from the audience. As you might be thinking, I actually had a question for the both of you, dealing with the constraints that we have as clinicians. We are in many ways, we have a culture and we're socialized to be a culture of risk aversion because we don't want patients to have accidental bad outcomes. And that really flies in the face of a spirit of innovation. So how do we balance that?
And obviously Karen will talk about the product there, but that's really the danger, isn't it, about stifling innovation and how we can fast track innovation into the system. So in the UK, they've started to develop other mechanisms to try and amplify and spread innovation, but it is a careful balance. So we have demonstrator test beds where products are tested in an environment that's live. We have, with My Trustee, we have stacks and stacks of research about how good it is for using with a whole range of different skin conditions, how you can use it on very young children. And these aren't like you see on television ads when so many people out of so many percent. And if you look at some of the bigger brands, you know, the quotes that they use there. Ours is genuine research. This is a product that we've used it for 25 years, the initial cream. So it's tried and tested in the NHS. So we need to balance how we can do that innovation with the risk. And it is about enabling that culture so that people will take that risk. And sometimes it's not about having lots of money. I think sometimes frugal innovation is good because it makes you think very, very carefully about how you spend the money to get the best result. So sometimes having too much money, not that we ever have too much money in the NHS, but sometimes having too much money thrown at a product actually can act detrimentally. So I think it's about, for us, it's about having the research. You know, we have people that blog about the product all the time. We have people that talk about it when they're going through their cancer treatment. They've used it with various skin conditions, and that's right across the population. And what I want to see is that we can fast track things quicker. So it'll be interesting to get the stateside version as well for you.
Yes, well, with our US version, because the sensor and the platform is now in the UK and also in the States, what we have in both countries is that we are always testing. We have a controlled environment for testing. We have our patients that are every day like providing feedback. And also we have our advisors, our medical advisors. and our regulatory advisors as well. I mean, we can't just create something and go outside without thinking the consequences of that. Even when our sensor, it can't be harming the life of the patients. It's more about how you are providing a possible solution and maybe not providing the benefits that you are saying that you are providing. Sometimes that is more harmful for the patient than if you can create something in their body. I don't want to say that that is not important. I mean, it's that you need to find the balance between both parts. And also, every time, like, understanding and thinking before you go outside to the outside, even when you think that it's like the perfect idea or the perfect product, you need to be like 100% sure that that will be a possibility for the patients.
Yeah, and you know, and one of the things that I do within my role is we've got an innovation portfolio at Salisbury. So within that portfolio, we've got, you know, these patient safety devices. So in the UK, you have various things like CE marking that you have to conform with. They have to go through rigorous clinical trials before you're even anywhere near sort of marketing them to bring about patient benefit. And it's about how you can work with a system. And I think in the UK, we're still trying to find our way about how we can make that faster. But there's a real determination in the NHS to try and break down some of these boundaries. You know, digital health is a massive area that we're trying to look at. You know, and all the data elements, you know, it is, in the UK, we have the most fantastic data set, because in the NHS, you don't have various insurance providers. You have, the NHS is the NHS, so you've got one data set right across a population of, so the UK, or if you want to say, break that down into countries, you've got the Scotland, Wales, Ireland and England. So that is absolutely unique, and people really want to try and use that data. So obviously we're talking nationally about how we can work with people to do that and do innovation. But it is incredibly difficult, but I'm more confident that we're breaking down those boundaries.
Thank you. Other thoughts or questions from the audience?
Mm-hmm.
And that's one question. What was the business model? And second, what exactly is the pushback behind, or why does the NHS not want their branding? What is the reason that they don't want their branding on the product?
Right. So if I take your sort of first question, there was no business model to do a beauty brand because it had never been done before. So the reason that we did it was that, and I think with innovation, if you have a product that's already there that you can try and capitalize on to bring money back into patient care that's already been used, why not try to do that? So it was really finding our feet, you know, working with people in the industry as well to help us develop that, working with our cosmetic company to develop the formulations that would be fit for purpose out in the, you know, within beauty regulations. So there was a whole raft of different things that we had to do. The push, you know, but our prime aim really was that people were telling us they wanted this product. You know, it was not us in a way saying, let's give this product to the world. People were crying out and asking for us to make it in a more commercial way that they could access it from all over the world, because they might have had a relative that had used it and said, oh, wasn't that brilliant? So we developed a wider business model really, because obviously one product, you can't have one product in a business line. So it was about how we can spread that to reduce risk, but also make it a worthwhile brand for people to invest in. And at the moment, the brand is in our, so it's sold within hospitals throughout the country. You can buy it online. It's also in some of our biggest retailers. So we have big retailers like pharmacy companies, big companies like Tesco's. I don't think you have Tesco's over in the USA, but we have Superdrugs is another one, and they are selling more volumes, because obviously you want volume sales. And for us as an organisation, our prime aim is to get a safe product out there bring in revenue that would actually enable us to invest more in our patient care. So all of this is extra revenue that we can bring in to support people. So that's the business model. And the pushback on the branding is a really interesting one. It's a bit like, why start with doctors or just the innovators? Because actually there's lots of people throughout the whole system and patients that are innovating. But I suppose you have to start somewhere, I think. And because my trust is an interesting one to look at the IP around it. You know, we didn't do a patent because they don't tend to do that in skincare. We have a trademark. People have tried to copy it, but it's something about getting to the market first and actually having that goodwill, and also the fact that you're already selling that product. So the pushback, I think, on this was because it wasn't seen as a medical device, and it was about, right, this is the first time we've ever had anybody try to use our branding in this way, so let's try it gently and just try saying about the Salisbury Hospital brand, how you could use the NHS bit in that. And the pushback that I gave to them is, we have a private hospital just down the road from us, and they have a big sign outside their hospital because they do take NHS patients under certain contracts if we can't get people in within a certain time. And within their big sign outside of their hospital, which is literally, I don't know, 10 minutes down the road from us, and some of our doctors work there, vice versa. We take patients from them because they don't have an intensive care unit, so if something goes wrong, they come to us. And they had on their sign at one stage, NHS patients, and using the NHS branding. So my pushback was, actually, they're a private organisation and they're using the NHS branding. This was born in the NHS. Let's use that branding that is our branding, and it's giving money back into the NHS. So the money from that goes back into Salisbury Hospital, but if another hospital wants to sell that product, then they have some of the money within that sale. So it enables them to sell it.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Yeah, that's what we did. Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting that you mentioned the Daily Mail as well. So we actually passed what we call the Daily Mail test. The Daily Mail is a paper that actually usually says, what are you doing? And actually the Daily Mail loved us. So that was really interesting. And it is about, yeah, don't ask for permission, do it. And you have to just do it and see what happens. And, you know, we did it very carefully. Our board were all on board with doing that. We did it really carefully to enable us to achieve that.
Yes.
Yeah, Salisbury is a very unique district hospital, not only for dealing with the international incident that we've got at the moment, but also, as I said, it was the first place that had a spin-out company, and that, you know, that is the very first place that did that. That is not a London trust or a massive teaching hospital. That was Salisbury, which is a small hospital of 4,000 staff. We've always had a very innovative approach, and we've had sort of an innovation lab type approach. We have got several joint ventures that we've worked with other companies. We've had other spin-outs. We've looked at how we can do other types of models within the UK system to do that. Where we are geographically, we are close to universities, but we're not a university hospital. So sort of 30 miles down the road, there's a Southampton University Hospital. So that makes it very easy, because obviously they've got the close links with the university, whereas we work with several universities depending on what the specialty is. So that is a little bit more complicated, but I think there are other systems within the UK structure, But a lot of the funding is, if you're an NHS trust, which we are, it's harder to do that because you're considered a big organisation rather than a lot of funding and grants go to small, medium enterprises. So how we're looking at that is partnering with small, medium enterprises sort of jointly that we can then work with them to get those grants. So I think there's a whole range of methodologies that you can use, and it's just being careful to think, what's the product we're trying to commercialise? Is there any blueprint of how it's been done previously? And if there's not, which is the case for some of the innovations that we're trying to commercialise, like a genetics one, it is finding your way, and then other people will follow you. So we are very proud that we've managed to achieve that in a small hospital against, you know, we're not Imperial, which is a massive trust, you know, and Guy's and St Thomas. And, you know, Alderhay is another great big hospital, a children's hospital with a worldwide reputation, that people from a whole range of commercial companies want to work with because they have got so much access to a great big population of very specialist skills. So it's how can we, as a smaller organisation, leverage what we have, which we think is quite unique. You know, we've first spin out, first skincare range, probably the first commercial genetics methodology. How can we do that and share that knowledge and partner with other people? So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Carol or Karen?
Mm.
So that it is more open to allow for people from social care or just out there, citizens, scientists, for instance, and those who want to get involved, technicians or technical people who like the idea of doing good for the sake of it, to get involved. I mean, is something you consider to be a plan?
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, there are lots of different organisations out there. There's like the National Clinical Entrepreneurship Programme, which has got, you know, a great deal of support behind it, and it is doing fantastic stuff. You know, the ethos is completely correct, and I suppose what they're having to do is to just bring it on board a bit at a time. So that's why patients haven't been involved at the start. That's why nurses haven't been involved in the start. Although I think that's a shame. I think it should have just been an open entry, but perhaps it was how they're testing it. Yeah, absolutely. So I think where I see this is about drawing on that knowledge of the wider community. So some of the work that I've done nationally and internationally was about people volunteering and generously contributing to a platform for, you know, the greater good, really, about how you can pull that knowledge together. So I think, you know, in England, I don't know how quite it works over in the USA, but there are a lot of what we call community interest companies. So they are developed because they want to put something back into the system, but actually they do still need the advice around entrepreneurship and how you can work with the connected silos every system's got. How can you leverage information around trademarks? How can you do those things that you've never done before? Or would the platform enable people to start having those conversations in a more open way? Because I think we have to look at open innovation so that we can try and work together and harness the wonderful knowledge that's out there. You know, so MedExo, I've been sat here the last 2 days and hearing firsthand, you know, about this, the SAFI system, and I talked to Larry after that about, is that something that we could try and talk about with a platform that would work in a similar way for innovators? So I think it's really over to the community about how this would develop, and I would like to work with people so we could start co-designing what that might look like. And I think it's different to the a national entrepreneurship program, and I know there's lots of different approaches that go off in other countries that, you know, try to promote entrepreneurship. And I think through my research, it was really clear that some people actually don't want to be entrepreneurs, they want to be intrapreneurs, because actually they love their job, but they just want to make a difference, and they want to make a difference in the particular way that works for them, and that's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, I think, you know, I'd be really interested in other people's conversations that perhaps, you know, from here and in the next few weeks about how the platform could be developed. That would be lovely. Thank you.